and welcome to Pod Strangely Warmed. I'm Daniel Hawkins, your host, and so glad that you are here with us as we continue a series of conversations in which we explore spiritual practices that form us in the faith in this season, both leading up to and following Pentecost, that day in which the church was formed, the Holy Spirit descended, and the people were filled with languages beyond their own, and all of a sudden the gospel was known in a way profoundly different than it might have been previously, right? The barriers that could disconnected people were broken down. And in many ways, spiritual practices have a way of doing that for us and through us. They have helped shape and form our lives. They help break down those barriers between us and God, creating those thin spaces in which God is near and at hand. As we continue in this journey with spiritual practices, we continue with our amazing co-hosts on this series. Chuck Norris has not yet made an appearance, right?
Working on it.
The great Reverend Kristin Warthen and the great Reverend Melissa Turkett. We're so thankful that you are here today. And I guess we probably can adopt your what you told us last time, Pastor Melissa and Pastor Kristin, rather. Yeah. Although I like the great. It's a good adjective.
It's huzzah.
Yeah. If you are with us.
Did you get that pop culture reference?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I have a pop culture bank. So, okay. Break down the fourth wall here for a second. I love sports. I like pop culture. Apparently I'm told many times that my pop culture knowledge is radically insufficient. And two of the folks who most frequently tell me that are across the table from me, who I deeply love and care deeply about. And so, but we're not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about work as a spiritual practice. Two words that often don't go together in our common lexicon, right? Two things that we think of Sabbath as a spiritual practice, right? The intentional stepping away from the act of work. But what does it mean for us to explore work itself as a spiritual practice, our daily vocation as an invitation to the holy? And how can that help us encounter God in the midst of what can often feel ordinary and mundane, the standard Tuesday, but God is near. And so as you guys explore this idea of work as spiritual formation and spiritual practice, what first pops to your mind as you think about this?
I think about how terrible my French is because
okay.
For me, work as a spiritual practice comes from the life of Saint Therese of Lisieux. I told you, terrible French.
That's pretty good.
It's better than I would have done.
Listen.
Yeah.
For somebody who rode barrels back in the day and, once worked at the Waffle House, that's pretty good French. I'm just saying.
I can say y'all and Lisieux.
There you go.
She was a Carmelite nun. She lived a very, very hard life. She was sick. She died at an early age, 24. She went to be a nun. She tried to be a nun at 15. But St. Therese had this terrible temper that plays into this. But she, when we look at the collection of her quotes and her life, and her life's work, she talked a lot about doing everything we could with great love. Every task we approach, doing it with great love. She is I found her. It's not like it's a business, but she is known for what is called the little way, right? The little way. And what I love about her life and this idea of work as a spiritual practice is that she when she died at 24, she was really just known for being an adequate nun. Like they just, she did what she was supposed to do. The sisters were not just, smitten with her. But she did everything with love. And she really redefined for me one of the most foully interpreted scriptures of my life that I've ever seen is that, that Philippians scripture, right? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Yeah. And oftentimes we use that as, I can do all things, like I can do it. Yeah. And in the life of Saint Therese, what that meant is everything I do, I can do through Christ. Every task I undergo, if I am doing the dishes, if I am folding the laundry, if I am digging a trench, right? I can do it with love. And in doing it with love, I'm doing it in the strength of Christ. And so for me, work as a spiritual practice is being attuned to the work that we do in such a way that we are intentional and we are doing it out of and in a spirit of love.
I love that so much. And it made me think of, so as ironic as this is, and I'd only do it because Daniel asked me to come do it, I'm technically on sabbatical right now. So I'm technically supposed to be practicing the rhythms of being out of the rhythms of work. But I kicked off my sabbatical with a yoga retreat, and which, if you know me, doesn't surprise anyone. But one of the things that I came across, I spent a lot of time reading during this retreat, and I loved it so much. And one of the things I came across was just a way to live into agape love, which, we talk about agape love in the church a lot of that's the unconditional love, right? The unconditional love of God, the love that we're trying to lean and live into. But as this invitation to remember who is at the center of, in agape love, God is at the center and we're moving towards God. And I think that, there's, kind of jokes in pop culture right now about main character energy and you being at the center, right? And that there can be something really empowering about that, but there can also be something really beautiful that I think, and wasn't she also called the little flower?
She was.
Okay.
Yes.
That St. Teresa offers to us is this idea of that when we use work as a spiritual practice, we're using it as a means and a way to remember that God is in the center and we're moving towards God.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what's so interesting about it is when you read about her, right? She had a foul little temper. I mean, which makes her more relatable to me because I know this shocks y'all, but if you were to live with me, you would know that Kristin can be quite quick-tempered. It does not shock y'all. I'm not even going to pretend. But she had a pretty quick temper. And the more she engaged everything she did through this lens of love, the more she engaged this little way, the more patience she developed. And it wasn't that things didn't irritate her. Sure. It's that she learned to turn the irritations even into spiritual practices. So there's this great story of going into a service at the monastery, and there was another nun who just kind of, I'm sorry, Dustin, lots of clicking, and it drove her just, it drove her nuts. And eventually, instead of saying something, instead of acting out at this nun kind of clicking through her rosary, or possibly she had false teeth that were ill-fitted, but whatever was causing the clicking and the clacking, Teresa kind of turned the rhythm of the click and the clack into a spiritual practice, right? I can't control this noise. Yeah. And Lord knows this is not silence that I'm being allowed to practice, but I can hear this as praise in this service. And so even those irritations, things that she used to maybe have a temper tantrum about, became things that drew her closer into God. And so there's just something about that. We call it work as spiritual practice, but it's really intentionality. It's taking the time to be intentional about what we're doing.
And I love that because that's a great invitation in any kind of prayer practice that we engage with, any kind of discipline that we engage with, is that there is permission to acknowledge what's happening around us and permission to name those things, and to sometimes we need to just let them go, or sometimes we need to invite them to become part of the practice of, I think of Susanna Wesley, John Wesley's mother, right? How many kids did the Wesleys have? I'm
7
blanking.
million.
Yeah, so many kids, right? Just chaos abounding. And she would throw her apron over her head, and her kids at least knew that during this time, we don't interrupt mom and we don't do something that mom's gonna be mad about when the apron comes off. But it was her time to have personal time with God. But if you've lived in a house with 1 to 3 kids to, 2 or 7 million, whatever it may be, you know that the kids aren't going to stop kidding in the midst of, the apron being thrown over the head. So I imagine, she too had to embrace like the sounds of her children as part of her practice, even while she was crafting this intentional. So the clicking and the clacking can become part of it as well.
Well, and I love that the invitation here, do small things with love and remember that even your work, God is at the center, right? Because so often we think of work as the space where we are at the center, right? I am, again, pop culture illiterate, so I am not Mr. Main Character Energy. But if you describe how many people, I know, Enneagram 3, hashtag, okay, whatever. But how often do we approach work within frankly, Enneagram 3 culture, right? Where success is the ultimate main goal within mainstream American culture, right? Where, moving up whatever your ladder is, right? How often is that about us and getting ours rather than even this place of work, which is so often not a place where we see by default expectation, God to be at the center. How different would the world be if it was at the center? And I think it's a Buechner quote, but I'm not 100% sure. But naming this reality of ladder climbing, right? At the end of his life, what if at the end of my life, I get to the point where I spent my entire life climbing ladders only to discover that I made it to the top of the wrong ladder?
Thomas Merton.
Thomas Merton. Okay, thank you.
There it is.
But that idea that work is, I mean, frankly, to live, we have to work, right? And in life, in working, we can find meaning or we can find misery, right? What do we have eyes to see? And what is our spirit as we seek to launch into it, right?
I think there's also something really important to name here, especially as like 3 pastors sitting at a table, where our calls can be so deeply influenced into we're called to this work, that it's vocation, that it's all of these deeper levels. But for some people, that's not the case. And there's still beauty in whether you're called in a deep vocational sense into your work, or if you are called to be, a good steward of your time that enables you to care for family or care for, right? But I think that this practice, the spiritual practice, whether it's more of my work is something that invades all these different spaces of my life, or my work is my work and my life is my life, it invites it to be a bit more holistic when we invite God into the midst of whether we're doing data entry or welcoming people or flipping hamburgers or whatever it may be. Yeah.
Well, and the idea that doing the small things was, you named that St. Therese was experienced as just a wholly adequate nun. Yeah. Right. Nondescript, wholly adequate. And yet when I wonder, I mean, obviously we're all speculating here, right? But I would wonder and would want to push back on that just a bit, because I wonder how often have we experienced folks who do live the small things with incredible love, right? And who do the smallest of things with love, and how often we wouldn't describe them as just average and ordinary, right? Maybe wholly adequate at the task of the job, but the spirit in which they are doing it. I mean, when we were moving last summer, we took 17,000 trips to Waco because that's where my parents and all of their stuff was. And so on one of those trips to Waco, we took the kids to eat lunch at a local hamburger place, and you said flipping hamburgers. People were literally flipping hamburgers and scooping ice cream and doing all this kind of thing. And 90% of the staff at the restaurant was wholly pleasant and wholly normal and all of that. And there was like 2 folks there who just did every one of the small things that they did with incredible energy and joy, and seemed to be loving their life that day, and seemed to be deeply caring about, whether your burger was what you wanted and all of that. And it was a different spirit, right? The small things were done in great love, to the point where, like, as we were leaving, I pulled him aside and said, look, thank you for living out this energy. Thank you for living out this joy. Thank you for, in a job that's hard and often gets overlooked and ignored, right? So know you were seen today. Know you were appreciated today. And, that what you are giving to the world is a gift, right? And so that small things with great love. I know people saw, she may not have been the, I don't know what metrics you use to judge a Carmelite nun, but, she may have been wholly adequate by whatever metrics are used to judge Carmelite nuns. But I can't help but wonder if in that spirit where she would be royally ticked off at the clicking, but then it flipped over time, that spirit change got noticed.
Yeah. I'm not sure what metric it is either, especially considering the Carmelite nuns gave us 2 great Teresas, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
What is the metric? They were both known for their service.
Yeah.
One incredibly, in incredibly small ways, wholly adequate, and one in incredibly large ways, right? So yeah, I think there's something to be said then just about the service that we give, the ways that we engage the world.
And I think there's something to that though of maybe there is something to push forward of the beauty of adequacy, of the beauty of doing the task well, but not doing it to this level of excellence. And I need an A++, and I need to be the one to receive the award or the recognition. But, like you did with the 2 people at the burger place of just doing it really well in a way that can't help but be noticed. But you're doing it, again, I think it takes you back to what is the reason and the motivation behind why you're doing it the way that you're doing it. And I think there's a beauty for those who are called to live a life like that. And there's going to be others, like the other Teresa of Avila, who's called to do it in the really big and boisterous ways, but both are worthy of honor and love. And I think that's something that perhaps we miss in our, as you already named it for us, our Enneagram 3 culture that we live in, this, drive to be successful and this drive to, you got to push until you burn out and give everything for your job and have nothing left for anyone else. But if you do things adequately, but with great love, how much more of a well do you have to give to every space and season of your life?
Yeah. Well, there's a quote that I'm going to butcher, so I'm not even going to try, but I'll tell you the heart of it that Teresa has. And it basically says that love does not keep a score. Love does not have a metric, right? When we are operating out of love, we're just doing. There is no expectation of return. There's no meritocracy there. It is just an act of love.
Well, and Paul said the negative version of that, right? In 1 Corinthians, right? Love does not keep a record of offense, right? But that scoreboard idea, we live life with a scoreboard. And how exhausting is it to keep track of all of the ways that people have offended us, right? All of the ways that people have caused harm, and then how often do we become exhausting to others when we are the people who are keeping lists? Does that make sense?
I'm going to make a pop culture reference.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm steeled and ready.
Okay, good. I preached a sermon a few years ago about keeping the score, right? The tally. And I used the image in the opening scene of Michael explaining how the good place works, right? Like everything you do is plus points, minus points. It's a rigged system when you're keeping score. It is a rigged system when you're keeping score. We'll never do enough. We'll never be good enough. We'll never. And so it can't be about the what.
Yeah.
It's got to be about the how. It's got to be about the spirit of it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a great, question that people might be asking at this point of like, okay, how do you do work as a spiritual discipline?
Right. Well, and what I've heard from you guys, it's the lens through which you approach what you are doing, right? Because frankly, all of our work is going to take on radically different forms, right? All 3 of us are pastor types sitting around this table, but we've been other things in previous seasons of life, and those have been radically different. And what does it look like to put love into the world looks very different in the commercial real estate industry than it did in, the English department at Howard Payne University, and then it did in wherever we found ourselves in different seasons of life, right? It looks different, but the question is, what is the spirit that we're bringing to it, right? How do we say what I do today will honor God and honor the God that lives and breathes in the humans who surround me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a task.
Yeah.
I mean, and yet, for those of us who are tempted to keep score, right? We can keep an internal scorecard on that too, right? Which is against the spirit that we're supposed to apply to the whole thing. And so there's this looping learning happening on there.
Yeah. Well, it just takes, it's interesting, Melissa, you brought up the, how do we do this, right? And one of the ways that we're engaging this podcast is to kind of move toward an end of the podcast where we say, here's the practice. We're going to practice it together.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about work as spiritual practice is it's not a 5-minute thing.
Right.
I mean,
right.
this is
we
a
can't
moment.
invite you to embody a spirit of prayer and walk you through
I mean, my
it
laptop is on the other side of this room. I could just get it out and start,
Right.
typing away in front of the, but that might get kind of boring.
Right. How am I going to prepare for the women's retreat with great love today? Right. So yeah, the practice instead is like wherever you are, set an alarm, pick a random time, 2:12. I don't know.
Yeah.
Pick a random time in the day that you're going to be working on something and just set an alarm. And when that alarm goes off, look at it and just ask yourself for the moment, what am I doing? And am I doing it with love and care?
Yeah.
Am I intentional about what I'm doing? Or am I just kind of going through the motions? Because it's not that the opposite of doing it with love and care is always seeking our best good. Sometimes it's just that we mindlessly get caught up in, I'm running this report again. I'm doing this research. I'm, my husband does some logistics work, right? Here I am, just
TPS reports.
Yeah, here's my next Excel sheet, Yeah.
That's like a way old school pop culture reference on TPS reports. But anyway, yeah, I know. I'm old. Okay. But yeah, how can we set that alarm? How can we create that internal reminder for each of us to say, today I'm going to embody love in the midst of it? And frankly, if you're a list person, right, who tends to have,
add it to the list, embody love. Check.
I mean,
but
seriously, whatever keeps it at the fore of your mind, right? We've adopted this spring a series where we put together a matrix every Monday with the outcomes we're going to deliver this week to the team in service. I mean, it's a very semi-corporate thing, but it helps us provide focus to our work in ministry as a church. But the thing that has been clear in every part of that, what are you going to deliver and when is a huge part of it. But without the how, these two don't matter. And so one of the things we've driven home with our team, right? You could get everything done perfectly and on time, but if you're a jerk about it, I don't care, right?
Yep.
And so how do we encapsulate within the spaces where we plan our work lives that reminder, right? Because we've all known the people who are incredible at their jobs, but terrible human beings, right? And we've all had moments where we are that human, right? Or maybe I have a confessional moment here. Y'all, that side of the table has not. This side of the table has. No actual comment, Melissa. We worked together for 4 years, and I'm sure she's got great stories.
On the next podcast. Dirt about Daniel.
Daniel's on sabbatical, therefore. No. But we've all had those moments, right? And so how do we, in our space, is it our phone going off? Is it our list that needs to have on it, right? The golden thread here is, how can I embody love in the midst of it? And I wonder how that will shift the way we approach our work and how we receive, not just how others receive us, but how do we receive the gift of this work?
Yeah. Well, I wonder if you can think back. So the concept of work as spiritual practice may feel like completely new. But I wonder if you can think back to those moments when you've been at your best, right? Yeah. Whether in real estate or in pastoral ministry or in this podcast setting, like the moments where you've been at your best. How have you been engaging your work?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Enneagram 3.
Right. And inevitably, they are moments where it's not about me, right? To the point of agape love, what's at the center, right? It's those moments that that whatever ego and whatever internal drive, whatever main character energy, I noted that's ironic. But whenever that is truly not just halfway, but truly set aside, right? In service of the God who is bigger. And Richard Rohr has a line where he will often say, we spend the first half of our life making a life, and in the second half of our life discovering meaning. And so work as spiritual practice is an invitation as we're making the life to also discover the meaning along the way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us today on Pod Strangely Warmed. It's been an incredible conversation. I'd love to hear, and I know we would love to hear from you how you are applying this. Did you set an alarm in your phone? Did you write it on your sheet? Did you say, you fools, this is the clear, easy way to make this happen, and you didn't even think of it? Let us know, because this is a tool that we want to be meaningful and useful to all God's people, especially those here in the bounds of the Central Texas Conference of the United Methodist Church. Today has been a good day, and I hope and pray you have experienced it as such. And as we go forward, know that these conversations will continue. We'll have continued conversation around spiritual practices that shape and form us so that we might walk with Christ day after day, not only seeking to serve him, but seeking the heart of Christ that enlivens every moment of our existence. So until next time, I'm Daniel Hawkins. Thank you, Kristin. Thank you, Melissa. We'll see you next time. All right, we are back. I know we said goodbye already, but you know, you have those moments where you leave a conversation and then all of a sudden we forgot and we missed this and we can't let this go. We've been talking about work as spiritual practice, and Melissa is and using a lot of pop culture references, right? And Melissa is wearing the Dolly Parton t-shirt today, embodying the spirit of
9 to 5.
So, as you sing that in your head, no, we're not going to sing along with you, but you're welcome for that earworm. And again, we're glad you've been here with us today. It is an incredible gift to be able to experience these conversations, not just on our own, but in community. And thank you for enduring our little PS here. We truly will now see you next time on Pod Strangely Warmed.